You walk into work every morning believing that professionalism, competence, and genuine human decency will eventually be recognized and rewarded by those around you. You invest your time, energy, and emotional resources in building authentic connections with colleagues who seem to appreciate your expertise and value your friendship. You interpret expressions of gratitude, frequent conversations, and shared laughter as evidence of mutual respect and potential romantic interest, never suspecting that your technical skills and helpful nature might actually be serving as convenient cover for entirely different relationship dynamics operating beneath the surface of workplace courtesy. The modern workplace operates like a delicate ecosystem where trust forms the invisible foundation of every professional relationship. When someone consistently demonstrates reliability and competence, they naturally become the go-to person for solving problems that others can't handle. This creates a unique dynamic where professional expertise intersects with personal vulnerability, often blurring the lines between duty and genuine care. The IT technician had built his reputation through countless late nights fixing servers, troubleshooting software glitches, and patiently explaining technology to frustrated colleagues. His dedication to maintaining the digital backbone of the company had earned him respect, but more importantly, it had positioned him as someone others could depend on when their professional world seemed to be falling apart. Trust, in these moments, becomes both a currency and a risk. When desperation meets competence, the stage is set for connections that transcend mere professional courtesy. In the corporate labyrinth, there are unwritten rules about who gets priority attention, and why certain requests receive immediate responses, while others languish in digital queues. The technician understood this hierarchy well, having navigated it for years with methodical precision. However, when she burst into his workspace that Tuesday afternoon, something shifted in his carefully maintained professional boundaries. Her frustration was palpable as she explained how her phone had become completely unresponsive during a critical client presentation, leaving her feeling exposed and incompetent in front of senior management. The ambient professional environment suddenly felt charged with urgency and personal stakes that went beyond typical technical support. He found himself abandoning his systematic approach to problem solving, instead focusing entirely on her immediate need for technological salvation. The loyalty he had always shown to his work now extended to her personal crisis, creating an intimacy that neither had anticipated. This moment of professional vulnerability would prove to be the catalyst for a series of events that would challenge everything he thought he knew about workplace relationships. What happens next in this scenario might surprise you, especially when we consider how acts of professional kindness can sometimes lead to unexpected emotional entanglements that blur the boundaries between gratitude and something deeper. The technician's willingness to prioritize her emergency over his regular duties wasn't just about technical expertise. It was about recognizing another person's genuine distress and responding with immediate action. As he worked to restore her phone, she watched with a mixture of relief and admiration, commenting on his skill and dedication in ways that made him feel valued beyond his job description. The restoration process became an extended conversation about work pressures, personal frustrations, and the challenges of maintaining professionalism when technology fails at the worst possible moments. Her genuine appreciation for his help created a connection that felt different from the transactional nature of most workplace interactions. The decency he showed in that moment would soon be tested in ways he never could have imagined. But sometimes, the very qualities that make us trustworthy also make us vulnerable to betrayal by those who mistake kindness for weakness. Professional environments often mask the complex emotional undercurrents that flow between colleagues, creating situations where genuine human connection becomes confused with romantic interest or personal obligation. The technician had always prided himself on maintaining clear boundaries between his technical expertise and personal relationships, but her obvious relief and gratitude began to chip away at those carefully constructed walls. As he successfully restored her phone and recovered her important files, her emotional response went beyond simple thanks. She spoke about how he had saved her career and prevented what could have been a professional disaster. This kind of dramatic language, while perhaps exaggerated, reflected her genuine sense of vulnerability and his role in protecting her from potential consequences. The workplace suddenly felt like a stage where small acts of competence could be transformed into grand gestures of rescue and salvation. His technical skills had become a form of professional heroism, at least in her eyes. The super-ascent she felt in that moment created a debt of gratitude that would soon complicate their professional relationship in unexpected ways. The psychology of workplace relationships operates on multiple levels, with official hierarchies existing alongside informal networks of influence, attraction, and mutual dependence. When someone solves a critical problem for us, especially during a moment of professional crisis, we naturally feel drawn to that person in ways that can transcend purely professional appreciation. The technician began to notice subtle changes in their interactions, longer conversations, more frequent visits to his workspace, and a warmth in her demeanor that seemed to acknowledge their shared experience of crisis and resolution. These micro-interactions, seemingly innocent on the surface, were building towards something neither of them had explicitly acknowledged. The ambient professional environment provided perfect cover for these developing feelings, allowing both parties to maintain plausible deniability about the true nature of their growing connection. Her increased presence in his workspace felt natural given their recent collaboration, but the underlying emotional current was becoming harder to ignore. The apprendizado from this experience was teaching him that professional competence could become a form of personal magnetism, attracting people who valued his ability to solve problems that others couldn't handle. Corporate culture often celebrates problem solvers and technical experts, but rarely prepares them for the emotional complications that can arise when their skills become the foundation for deeper personal connections. The technician found himself looking forward to her visits, preparing clever solutions to problems she hadn't even encountered yet, and taking extra care with his appearance on days when he knew she might stop by his workspace. This shift from reactive problem-solving to proactive relationship maintenance marked a significant change in his professional priorities. The confidence he felt in his technical abilities was now extending to his personal interactions, making him feel capable of navigating whatever might develop between them. Her continued appreciation and friendly demeanor seemed to validate his growing belief that their connection was mutual and meaningful. The workplace had become a space where his professional identity and personal desires were beginning to merge in ways that felt both exciting and slightly dangerous. He was learning that sometimes the most significant relationships begin with the simplest acts of professional kindness, though he had yet to discover how quickly such connections could be complicated by factors beyond his control. Looking back, the technician would later recognize this period as a masterclass in how workplace dynamics can create illusions of intimacy and connection that may not reflect the true intentions of all parties involved. His willingness to drop everything and prioritize her emergency had established a pattern of availability and dedication that she had come to expect and appreciate. The professional environment had provided the perfect framework for their developing relationship. Regular contact, shared challenges, and opportunities for him to demonstrate his value through technical expertise. However, the very qualities that made him trustworthy and reliable, his loyalty, his willingness to help, his professional competence, were also making him vulnerable to disappointment and potential betrayal. The workplace had become a stage where his genuine care for her well-being was being performed daily through small acts of technical support and friendly conversation. His confidence in their connection was built on a foundation of professional interaction and mutual respect, but he was about to learn that not everyone views workplace relationships through the same lens of sincerity and long-term potential. The deception that was approaching would teach him valuable lessons about the difference between professional appreciation and personal commitment. The art of expressing gratitude in professional settings requires a delicate balance between acknowledging someone's effort and maintaining appropriate boundaries. Yet sometimes emotions break through these carefully constructed barriers with unexpected intensity. When she spoke those words, "You saved my life, I don't know how to thank you," the technician felt something shift in the atmosphere of his usually sterile workspace. Her voice carried a vulnerability that transcended typical workplace appreciation, creating an intimacy that seemed to acknowledge the personal stakes involved in what might have appeared to others as routine technical support. The phrase itself, while perhaps hyperbolic, reflected her genuine sense of relief and the emotional weight she had placed on this technological crisis. In that moment, the ambient professional environment felt charged with possibility and unspoken understanding. Her gratitude wasn't just about data recovery or phone functionality. It was about someone caring enough to prioritize her crisis above their regular duties. The confianza she was placing in him extended far beyond his technical abilities, encompassing a belief in his character and commitment to helping others succeed. Professional relationships often operate within rigid frameworks of expectation and reciprocity, but moments of genuine vulnerability can transform these transactional interactions into something more meaningful and personal. As the technician worked to restore her files and applications, she watched with fascination, asking questions that revealed her genuine interest in understanding both the technical process and the person performing it. Her comments about not knowing how to thank him created an unresolved tension, a debt of gratitude that seemed to require more than simple verbal acknowledgement. The workplace suddenly felt like a stage where acts of professional competence could be interpreted as personal gestures of care and support. He found himself explaining technical concepts with unusual patience and detail, enjoying her attention and the opportunity to demonstrate expertise that went beyond his usual troubleshooting duties. The loyalty he had always shown to his work was now being directed toward her specifically, creating a connection that felt both professionally appropriate and personally meaningful. Her gratitude was becoming a form of currency that made him feel valued in ways that extended far beyond his job description. The psychology of workplace gratitude operates on multiple levels, creating complex emotional dynamics that can easily be misinterpreted by parties who are operating with different expectations and intentions. Her declaration about him saving her life established a narrative of rescue and salvation that elevated their interaction beyond routine technical support into something more dramatically significant. The technician began to internalize this role of protector and problem solver, finding satisfaction in being someone she could turn to when professional crises threatened her stability and success. The frustration she had felt during her technological crisis was now being replaced by relief and appreciation that seemed to acknowledge him as uniquely capable of providing solutions others couldn't offer. This dynamic was creating an emotional dependency that neither of them had explicitly acknowledged, but both were beginning to rely upon. The workplace environment provided perfect cover for these developing feelings, allowing both parties to maintain professional pretenses while engaging in increasingly personal interactions. However, what seemed like mutual appreciation and growing connection might actually be revealing different motivations and long-term intentions that would soon create unexpected complications. Corporate environments often blur the lines between professional competence and personal attractiveness, creating situations where technical skills become a form of charisma that can attract attention and admiration from colleagues. The technician's ability to solve her crisis had positioned him as someone uniquely valuable in her professional ecosystem, but her gratitude was beginning to extend beyond appreciation for technical expertise into something that felt more personal and emotionally charged. As she continued to express her inability to adequately thank him, he found himself suggesting ways she might show her appreciation, perhaps coffee, lunch, or simply the opportunity to continue their conversations beyond the immediate crisis. The ambient professional environment made these suggestions feel natural and appropriate, even as they were clearly moving their relationship into more personal territory. Her enthusiastic agreement to these suggestions seemed to confirm that their connection was mutual and meaningful, creating expectations that would soon be tested by realities he hadn't yet discovered. The apprendizado from this experience was teaching him that sometimes professional heroism can create emotional connections that transcend workplace boundaries, though he was still unaware of the potential complications that might arise when gratitude becomes confused with genuine romantic interest. The expression of profound gratitude in workplace settings can create emotional bonds that feel more significant than they actually are, especially when one party is interpreting appreciation through the lens of potential romantic connection. Her repeated emphasis on being unable to adequately thank him was creating a sense of ongoing obligation and emotional debt that seemed to require continued interaction and increasing intimacy to resolve. The technician found himself treasuring these expressions of gratitude, replaying her words, and analyzing her tone for evidence of deeper feelings and long-term interest. The confidence he felt in his technical abilities was now extending to his interpretation of social and emotional cues, making him believe that her appreciation reflected genuine attraction and romantic potential. The workplace had become a space where his professional identity and personal desires were perfectly aligned, creating a sense of purpose and fulfillment that extended far beyond his usual job satisfaction. Her gratitude was validating his belief that technical competence could be a pathway to meaningful personal relationships, though he was still unaware of the external factors that might complicate this seemingly straightforward emotional equation. The superasson he was experiencing came from feeling genuinely appreciated and valued for qualities that went beyond his job description. Professional gratitude often creates expectations of reciprocity and continued interaction that can be misinterpreted when parties have different understandings of what these expressions actually mean. The technician began to view her dramatic expressions of thanks as evidence of a deeper emotional connection that would naturally evolve into something more personally meaningful over time. Her words about him saving her life had created a narrative framework where he was cast as the hero of her professional story, a role that felt both satisfying and emotionally significant. The workplace environment provided numerous opportunities for him to continue demonstrating this heroic competence through ongoing technical support and friendly consultation. Each successful problem-solving interaction seemed to reinforce the emotional bond that her initial gratitude had established, creating a pattern of crisis and resolution that felt like the foundation of a meaningful relationship. The loyalty he was developing toward her specifically was beginning to supersede his general commitment to helping all colleagues equally. However, he was still operating under the assumption that her gratitude reflected genuine personal interest rather than simply appreciating someone who could provide valuable professional services when needed. The technician's interpretation of her grateful words would later serve as a masterclass in how workplace interactions can create illusions of romantic potential that may not reflect the actual intentions of all parties involved. Her dramatic language about life-saving and inadequate gratitude had established emotional stakes that seemed to demand continued interaction and escalating intimacy to properly resolve. He began to plan ways to extend their professional relationship into more personal territory, using her expressed gratitude as justification for suggesting activities and interactions that went beyond typical workplace boundaries. The deception that was approaching would teach him that professional appreciation, no matter how dramatically expressed, doesn't necessarily translate into personal romantic interest. The ambient professional environment had provided perfect camouflage for what he interpreted as mutual attraction, but what might actually have been simple gratitude for competent technical support. Her inability to adequately thank him would soon be resolved in ways he never anticipated, revealing that gratitude and romantic interest operate on entirely different emotional wavelengths. The trésor he was about to experience would force him to reconsider everything he thought he understood about workplace relationships and the true meaning behind expressions of professional appreciation. The post-crisis period in workplace relationships often reveals the true nature of connections that were formed during moments of professional vulnerability, creating patterns of interaction that can either strengthen genuine bonds or expose underlying motivations. In the days following her phone restoration, she began appearing in his workspace with increasing frequency, transforming what had been an emergency intervention into a regular social routine. Her presence brought an energy that was distinctly different from typical professional consultations. She lingered longer, engaged in conversations that had little to do with technical issues, and seemed genuinely interested in his perspective on topics ranging from workplace politics to internet humor. The ambient professional environment provided perfect cover for these extended interactions, allowing both parties to maintain the pretense that her visits were work-related, while clearly enjoying the personal connection that was developing. The confianza she had placed in his technical abilities was now extending to his judgment on matters far beyond computer repair, creating an intimacy that felt both professionally appropriate and personally meaningful. Her laughter at his jokes and memes suggested a compatibility that transcended their initial crisis response dynamic. The workplace had become a stage where genuine friendship, or perhaps something deeper, seemed to be naturally evolving from professional competence and mutual appreciation. Professional relationships built on shared humor and frequent casual interaction often feel more authentic and meaningful than those maintained through formal workplace protocols, creating emotional bonds that can easily be misinterpreted by parties operating with different expectations. The technician found himself looking forward to her visits with an anticipation that went far beyond professional satisfaction, beginning to prepare interesting content and conversation topics that might extend their interactions and deepen their connection. Her requests for help, even with minor issues that she could clearly handle independently, seemed to acknowledge that their relationship had evolved beyond simple technical support into something more personally valuable. The loyalty she was demonstrating by consistently choosing him as her go-to person for various workplace challenges felt like evidence of genuine preference and emotional investment. These daily interactions were creating a routine of mutual availability and attention that felt like the foundation of a meaningful relationship. The frustration he had previously felt about routine workplace interactions was being replaced by genuine excitement about coming to work and engaging with someone who seemed to genuinely value his company. Her willingness to seek his help, even when unnecessary, appeared to reflect a desire to maintain connection that went beyond purely practical considerations. The psychology of unnecessary help-seeking in workplace relationships often reveals deeper emotional needs and desires that parties may not be willing to acknowledge directly through more conventional social approaches. Her frequent appearances in his workspace, accompanied by minor technical questions that she could easily resolve independently, were creating opportunities for extended conversation and personal connection that felt natural within the professional framework. The technician began to recognize these requests as social overtures rather than genuine technical needs, a realization that made him feel valued for qualities that extended far beyond his job-related expertise. The workplace environment was providing perfect camouflage for what felt like courtship behavior, allowing both parties to explore their connection without explicitly acknowledging the romantic undertones of their increasing intimacy. Her laughter at his memes and willingness to engage in extended conversations about topics unrelated to work suggested a compatibility that seemed to promise potential for relationship development beyond their current professional boundaries. The apprendizado from these interactions was teaching him that sometimes the most meaningful connections develop gradually through consistent small interactions rather than dramatic romantic gestures. However, there were subtle signs that he was choosing to interpret optimistically rather than examining more critically for their actual significance. Corporate culture often celebrates collaboration and friendly colleague relationships, but rarely provides guidance for distinguishing between genuine personal interest and strategic social behavior designed to maintain valuable professional connections. The technician's workspace had become a regular destination for her daily routine, transforming his previously quiet and focused work environment into a social hub that felt vibrant and emotionally engaging. Her ability to find humor in his internet discoveries and engage meaningfully with his observations about workplace dynamics created a sense of intellectual and emotional compatibility that seemed to validate his growing romantic interests. The confidence he felt in their developing relationship was reinforced by her consistent choice to spend discretionary time in his presence rather than with other colleagues who might offer different types of professional or social value. Each successful interaction, every shared laugh, every extended conversation, every unnecessary help request, seemed to build toward something more personally significant than typical workplace friendship. The superasson he was experiencing came from feeling genuinely appreciated, not just for his technical skills, but for his personality, humor, and perspective on various topics. The ambient professional environment was providing perfect cover for what felt like natural relationship development, though he was still unaware of external factors that might complicate his interpretation of her motivations. The pattern of frequent casual interaction and unnecessary help-seeking often creates emotional dependencies that can be misinterpreted when parties have different understandings of what these behaviors actually represent in terms of long-term intentions. Her daily visits had established a routine of mutual availability and attention that felt like evidence of genuine romantic potential, especially when combined with her enthusiastic responses to his humor and her willingness to engage in conversations that had little relevance to professional development. The technician began to invest increasing emotional energy in these interactions, preparing content and conversation topics that might deepen their connection and create opportunities for more explicit acknowledgement of their mutual attraction. The workplace had become a space where his professional competence was seamlessly integrated with his personal charm, creating a sense of authentic self-expression that felt both professionally appropriate and personally fulfilling. Her consistent choice to seek his help, even with issues she could resolve independently, seemed to reflect a genuine desire to maintain connection that went beyond purely practical considerations. The deception that was approaching would soon reveal whether her frequent presence reflected genuine personal interest or simply the strategic maintenance of a valuable professional relationship. The loyalty he was developing toward her specifically was beginning to create expectations that would soon be tested by realities he hadn't yet discovered. Looking back, this period of frequent casual interaction and escalating intimacy would serve as a crucial lesson in how workplace relationships can create powerful illusions of mutual romantic interest that may actually reflect very different motivations and long-term goals. The technician's interpretation of her behavior, the unnecessary help requests, the extended conversations, the shared laughter at memes, had created a narrative of developing romance that felt supported by consistent evidence of mutual enjoyment and compatibility. The professional environment had provided perfect camouflage for what he interpreted as courtship behavior, allowing both parties to explore their connection without explicitly acknowledging the romantic implications of their increasing intimacy. However, he was still operating under the assumption that her frequent presence and enthusiastic engagement reflected genuine personal interest rather than simply enjoying the company of someone who consistently provided valuable services and entertaining conversation. The ambient professional environment had created conditions where strategic relationship maintenance could easily be mistaken for authentic romantic development. Her willingness to spend discretionary time in his presence was being interpreted through the lens of mutual attraction, rather than considering alternative explanations for her consistent availability and engagement. The trahison that was approaching would force him to reconsider everything he thought he understood about the difference between professional appreciation and personal romantic commitment. The foundation that was being built through daily interaction and shared humor would soon be tested in ways that would reveal the true nature of workplace relationships and the complex motivations that drive seemingly straightforward social behavior. Her frequent visits and unnecessary help requests had created a routine of intimacy and mutual availability that felt like evidence of genuine romantic potential, but were actually establishing patterns that served purposes he had not yet recognized. The workplace dynamics that had seemed to support their developing relationship were actually providing cover for activities and intentions that would soon become apparent in ways that would challenge everything he believed about their connection. The confianza he had placed in his interpretation of her behavior was about to be tested by external realities that would reveal the difference between enjoying someone's company and committing to exclusive romantic involvement with them. The moment when workplace illusions collide with stark reality creates a psychological shock that reverberates through every assumption and expectation that has been carefully constructed over time. The technician sat in the general meeting, half listening to quarterly reports and strategic initiatives, when his peripheral vision caught a movement that would forever alter his understanding of workplace relationships and personal connections. She was rising from her seat with unusual haste, her professional demeanor suddenly replaced by barely contained excitement as she made eye contact with someone across the room. The regional director, a man whose presence commanded respect and whose influence extended far beyond the local office hierarchy, was gesturing toward the exit with a familiarity that seemed to transcend professional protocol. The ambient professional environment of the meeting room suddenly felt charged with an entirely different kind of energy, as the technician watched two people navigate their departure with a coordination that suggested prior planning and mutual understanding. The confianza he had built in his interpretation of recent events was beginning to crack as he observed body language and social dynamics that told a very different story than the one he had been constructing in his mind. The loyalty he thought he had been building with her was being recontextualized in real time as he witnessed interactions that revealed alternative explanations for her recent behavior. Corporate meetings often serve as unintentional theaters where personal dramas unfold against the backdrop of professional presentations and strategic discussions, revealing relationships and alliances that operate beneath the surface of official organizational charts. The technician's attention was completely diverted from the presenter's quarterly analysis as he watched her move toward the exit with a grace and purpose that seemed to acknowledge an entirely different set of priorities than those being discussed in the meeting. The regional director's smile and welcoming gesture carried an intimacy that suggested a relationship dynamic far more developed than any casual professional interaction. Their synchronized movement toward the door revealed a level of coordination and mutual understanding that could only have been established through extensive prior communication and shared experiences. The workplace suddenly felt like a stage where he had been unknowingly performing a supporting role in someone else's romantic story, his technical expertise and friendly companionship serving as convenient cover for activities and relationships that existed entirely outside his awareness. The frustration he began to feel was not just about romantic disappointment, but about the realization that his professional environment had been concealing realities that fundamentally altered his understanding of recent events. The super-assault he thought he had been experiencing was being revealed as a form of emotional misdirection that had kept him focused on surface interactions while missing the deeper currents of attraction and commitment that were actually shaping her behavior. The psychology of workplace observation often reveals information that challenges our most carefully constructed narratives about relationships and personal connections, forcing us to reconsider everything we thought we understood about human motivations and social dynamics. As the technician watched her hand find the regional directors with natural ease, he experienced the cognitive dissonance that comes from witnessing evidence that contradicts our most fundamental assumptions about people we thought we knew well. Their intertwined fingers spoke of a level of intimacy and comfort that could only have been developed through significant time and emotional investment. Yet her recent behavior with him had suggested an entirely different trajectory of romantic possibility. The meeting room became a space where his professional identity and personal desires were being simultaneously exposed as inadequate and irrelevant to the real dynamics that governed workplace relationships. The confidence he had felt in his interpretation of social cues and romantic signals was being systematically dismantled by the evidence of his own eyes. The ambient professional environment that had seemed to support his developing relationship with her was now revealing itself as elaborate camouflage for activities and connections that operated on entirely different levels of power, influence, and personal significance. The deception he was beginning to experience was not just about romantic disappointment, but about the fundamental misunderstanding of how workplace hierarchies and personal attractions actually intersect in real professional environments. Professional environments often mask complex power dynamics and personal relationships that operate according to rules and motivations that have little to do with the official organizational structure or stated company values. The technician's realization that her recent increased attention might have been strategic rather than romantic was creating an emotional vertigo that made him question not just this specific relationship, but his entire approach to interpreting workplace interactions. The regional director's obvious comfort and familiarity with her suggested a relationship that had been developing parallel to her interactions with him, using his technical expertise and friendly conversation as convenient cover for maintaining professional appearances. Their departure from the meeting carried an urgency and excitement that revealed the true object of her romantic interest and emotional investment, making his recent experiences feel like elaborate performance rather than authentic connection. The workplace hierarchy was suddenly visible in ways that explained her behavior patterns, her increased presence in his workspace, and her strategic use of his technical expertise to maintain professional credibility while pursuing entirely different personal objectives. The loyalty he had been developing toward her was being recontextualized as useful professional camouflage rather than reciprocated romantic interest. The aprendizado from this revelation was teaching him that sometimes the most significant workplace relationships are those that remain hidden from public view, operating according to power dynamics and personal attractions that transcend traditional professional boundaries. The moment of recognition when workplace illusions are shattered by undeniable visual evidence creates a form of emotional whiplash that forces immediate recalibration of assumptions, expectations, and self-perception. The technician found himself unable to focus on the remainder of the meeting as his mind processed the implications of what he had witnessed. Each gesture and interaction from recent days now taking on entirely different meanings and significance. Her laughter at his memes, her unnecessary help requests, her frequent presence in his workspace, all of these behaviors were being reframed as strategic relationship management rather than genuine romantic interest. The professional environment that had seemed to nurture their developing connection was now revealed as an elaborate stage set where multiple relationship dynamics were operating simultaneously, with him playing the role of useful professional resource, while entirely different romantic scripts were being performed elsewhere. The confidence he had felt in his ability to interpret social cues and romantic signals was being replaced by a more sobering understanding of how power, influence, and strategic thinking actually govern workplace relationships. The ambient professional environment was suddenly visible as a complex ecosystem, where technical competence, while valuable, was not necessarily the most important currency for achieving personal objectives or securing romantic partners. The superasson he thought he had been experiencing was being revealed as a form of professional utility rather than personal romantic success. Corporate culture often celebrates technical expertise and professional competence, while simultaneously operating according to informal power structures and personal relationships that can make individual merit feel irrelevant to actual social and romantic success. The technician's growing awareness that his recent interactions with her had served purposes entirely different from those he had imagined was creating a psychological reorganization that extended far beyond simple romantic disappointment. The regional director's obvious priority in her romantic landscape was forcing him to confront the reality that workplace relationships often operate according to hierarchical attractions and strategic considerations that have little to do with personal compatibility or shared interests. Her departure from the meeting with intertwined fingers and shared laughter was demonstrating the difference between enjoying someone's professional company and committing to exclusive romantic involvement with them. The workplace environment that had seemed to support their developing relationship was actually providing perfect cover for maintaining valuable professional connections while pursuing entirely different personal objectives. The frustration he was experiencing was not just about romantic rejection, but about the realization that his professional environment contained layers of complexity and strategic behavior that he had been completely missing. The trahison he was beginning to recognize was not just personal, but professional, involving the strategic use of his expertise and attention to maintain appearances while actual romantic investments were being made elsewhere. Looking back, this moment of recognition would serve as a watershed event that fundamentally altered his understanding of workplace relationships, power dynamics, and the complex motivations that drive seemingly straightforward social interactions between colleagues. The visual evidence of her romantic connection with the regional director was forcing him to reconsider every interaction, every expression of gratitude, every moment of shared laughter through an entirely different interpretive lens. The professional environment that had seemed to nurture mutual attraction and developing romance was being revealed as a complex social ecosystem where technical expertise, while valuable, was not necessarily the most important factor in determining romantic success or personal significance. Her strategic use of his professional services and friendly conversation was becoming apparent as sophisticated relationship management rather than authentic romantic interest. The deception that was crystallizing would teach him valuable lessons about the difference between being professionally useful and being personally desirable, between being appreciated for services rendered and being chosen for exclusive romantic commitment. The workplace dynamics that had seemed to support their developing relationship were actually concealing entirely different power structures and personal attractions that operated according to rules he was only beginning to understand. The ambient professional environment was suddenly visible as a stage where multiple relationship scripts were being performed simultaneously, with him playing a supporting role in someone else's romantic story, while believing himself to be the leading man in his own narrative of developing love and mutual attraction. The power of workplace gossip to illuminate hidden dynamics and reveal the true nature of professional relationships often strikes with the precision of a surgical blade, cutting through carefully maintained illusions to expose realities that have been operating beneath the surface of polite professional interaction. The technician felt the whispered words hit him like a physical blow, each syllable carrying implications that recontextualized everything he thought he understood about recent events and his role within the complex social ecosystem of his workplace. The colleague's observation, delivered with the casual cruelty that often accompanies office humor, revealed that others had been aware of relationship dynamics that he had completely missed while focusing on his own interpretation of events. The ambient professional environment suddenly felt like a theater, where he had been unknowingly performing for an audience that understood the plot far better than he did. The confianza he had placed in his ability to read social situations and romantic signals was being systematically dismantled by the realization that his workplace contained layers of knowledge and awareness that extended far beyond his personal experience. The loyalty he thought he had been building was being revealed as one-sided emotional investment in someone whose actual romantic interests lay entirely outside his sphere of influence or attraction. The workplace hierarchy was becoming visible in ways that explained not just her recent behavior, but the knowing looks and subtle communications that had apparently been circulating among colleagues who understood power dynamics far better than he had. Professional environments often operate like complex information networks, where knowledge about personal relationships and romantic connections circulates through informal channels that can remain invisible to those who are directly involved in the unfolding drama. The whispered comment about position and heart-fixing carried multiple layers of meaning that went far beyond simple wordplay, revealing an understanding of how workplace power structures influence romantic attraction and personal relationships. The technician began to realize that his recent interactions with her had been observed and interpreted by colleagues who understood the significance of hierarchical dynamics in ways that he had been naive enough to ignore completely. The frustration he was experiencing was not just about romantic disappointment, but about the humiliation of discovering that his emotional investment had been transparent to others who recognized its futility from the beginning. The regional director's position carried forms of influence and attraction that transcended personal compatibility or shared interests, operating according to power dynamics that made technical expertise seem irrelevant to romantic success. The workplace suddenly felt like a social laboratory, where his emotions and expectations had been unknowingly studied by colleagues who understood the rules of engagement far better than he did. The superasson he thought he had been experiencing was being revealed as a form of professional naivety that had made him an object of sympathetic observation rather than romantic envy. The psychology of workplace power dynamics often creates romantic attractions that have more to do with influence, status, and career advancement than with personal compatibility or emotional connection, revealing how professional hierarchies can shape personal relationships in ways that transcend individual merit or technical competence. The colleague's whispered observation about fixing hearts carried an implicit understanding that the regional director's appeal lay not just in personal charisma, but in his ability to influence careers, create opportunities, and provide forms of professional security that went far beyond what technical expertise could offer. The technician's growing awareness of these power dynamics was forcing him to reconsider not just this specific situation, but his entire approach to understanding workplace relationships and romantic attraction within professional environments. The deception he was experiencing was being compounded by the realization that others had recognized these dynamics from the beginning, making his emotional investment appear naive rather than romantic. The ambient professional environment was suddenly visible as a complex ecosystem where career considerations and personal attractions intersected in ways that made individual merit feel irrelevant to actual romantic success. The confidence he had felt in his interpretation of social cues was being replaced by a more sobering understanding of how strategic thinking and power awareness actually govern workplace relationships. The apprendizado from this revelation was teaching him that sometimes the most significant attractions operate according to professional logic rather than personal compatibility. Corporate culture often celebrates individual achievement and technical expertise while simultaneously operating according to informal power structures that can make personal merit feel inadequate compared to hierarchical influence and career-advancing potential. The whispered comment about heart-fixing was revealing the colleagues' sophisticated understanding of how romantic attractions actually function within professional environments, where position and influence often carry more weight than personal qualities or shared interests. The technician's realization that his technical skills, while professionally valuable, were not necessarily romantically compelling compared to the regional director's career-influencing capabilities was creating a psychological reorganization that extended far beyond simple romantic disappointment. The workplace environment that had seemed to support his developing relationship was being revealed as a complex social system where multiple forms of value and attraction operated simultaneously, with hierarchical power often trumping personal compatibility in determining romantic outcomes. Her strategic use of his professional services was becoming apparent as sophisticated relationship management that maintained valuable technical support while pursuing entirely different romantic objectives based on career considerations and power dynamics. The loyalty he had been developing was being recontextualized as useful professional utility rather than reciprocated romantic interest. The ambient professional environment was suddenly visible as a stage where career advancement and personal relationships intersected in ways that made his technical expertise feel professionally valuable but romantically irrelevant. The moment when workplace illusions are shattered by colleague observations often creates a form of social embarrassment that goes beyond simple romantic disappointment to encompass professional humiliation and social naivety. The technician's growing awareness that his emotional investment had been transparent to colleagues who understood the futility of competing with hierarchical power was creating a psychological vertigo that made him question not just this specific relationship but his entire approach to navigating workplace social dynamics. The whispered comment about position-fixing hearts was revealing the sophisticated social intelligence that others possessed about power dynamics, career considerations, and romantic attractions within professional environments. His recent behavior, the extra attention to her problems, the extended conversations, the obvious emotional investment, was being reframed as professionally naive rather than romantically admirable. The workplace hierarchy was becoming visible in ways that explained not just her romantic preferences, but the social dynamics that had been operating beneath the surface of their recent interactions. The frustration he was experiencing was not just about romantic rejection, but about the professional embarrassment of having his emotions and expectations become the subject of colleague observation and sympathetic commentary. The superação he thought he had been achieving was being revealed as a form of social performance that had entertained rather than impressed his professional audience. Professional environments often serve as complex social laboratories where individual emotional investments can become the subject of collective observation and analysis by colleagues who understand power dynamics and romantic attractions far better than those who are directly involved in the unfolding drama. The technician's realization that his recent behavior had been interpreted by others as professionally naive rather than romantically promising was creating a social embarrassment that extended far beyond simple personal disappointment. The colleague's whispered observation carried an implicit understanding of workplace relationships that revealed his own lack of sophistication about how career considerations and hierarchical attractions actually influence romantic outcomes within professional settings. The regional director's appeal was becoming apparent as multidimensional, encompassing not just personal charisma, but career-advancing potential that made technical expertise seem irrelevant to romantic competition. The workplace environment that had seemed to nurture his developing relationship was being revealed as a complex ecosystem where strategic thinking and power awareness governed romantic success far more than personal compatibility or shared interests. The deception he was experiencing was being compounded by the professional humiliation of having his emotional investment become the subject of colleague commentary and workplace gossip. The trahison he was recognizing was not just personal but social, involving the realization that his professional environment contained levels of complexity and strategic behavior that had made his romantic efforts appear naive rather than admirable to those who understood the actual rules of workplace relationship dynamics. Looking back, this moment of colleague observation would serve as a crucial education in how workplace relationships actually function beneath the surface of professional courtesy and technical collaboration, revealing social dynamics that operate according to power structures and career considerations rather than personal merit or romantic compatibility. The whispered comment about position-fixing hearts would become a defining moment in his understanding of how hierarchical influence shapes romantic attraction within professional environments, making technical expertise feel professionally valuable but romantically insufficient compared to career-advancing potential and organizational power. The ambient professional environment was being revealed as a stage where multiple relationship scripts operated simultaneously, with him playing the role of useful technical resource, while entirely different romantic dynamics unfolded, according to rules he was only beginning to comprehend. Topic 6. On Monday, she returned to the sector and said, "It's nothing serious, just opportunities." The art of professional damage control often reveals more about true intentions and character than the original actions that necessitated explanation, creating moments where carefully chosen words attempt to manage perceptions while simultaneously confirming the very suspicions they seek to dispel. When she appeared in his workspace that Monday morning, her demeanor carried a studied casualness that felt distinctly different from the natural ease of their previous interactions. The weekend had apparently provided time for strategic consideration of how to address the obvious questions that her Friday departure with the regional director had raised among observant colleagues. Her opening statement about nothing serious and opportunities was delivered with the kind of calculated ambiguity that politicians use when they want to acknowledge reality without accepting responsibility for its implications. The ambient professional environment suddenly felt charged with unspoken tensions as she attempted to navigate the delicate balance between maintaining valuable professional relationships and managing the social fallout from her romantic choices. The confianza she had previously demonstrated in their interactions was now being replaced by a more guarded approach that suggested awareness of how her recent behavior might be perceived by someone who had clearly developed emotional investments in their relationship. The loyalty she was attempting to preserve through careful explanation was actually highlighting the strategic nature of her previous attention and engagement. The workplace had become a stage where damage control and relationship management were being performed with the same energy that had previously been directed toward building connection and mutual appreciation. Professional relationships often require complex navigation when personal choices create potential conflicts with valuable workplace connections, forcing individuals to develop sophisticated communication strategies that attempt to preserve beneficial associations while pursuing entirely different personal objectives. Her characterization of her connection with the regional director as opportunities rather than romance was revealing the calculated nature of her approach to workplace relationships and career advancement. The technician found himself listening to language that was designed to minimize the significance of what he had witnessed, while simultaneously acknowledging that something meaningful was indeed developing between her and someone else. The frustration he was experiencing was not just about romantic disappointment, but about the realization that their recent interactions had been managed with the same strategic thinking that was now being applied to explaining her weekend activities. Her careful word choice suggested an awareness that her romantic pursuits might jeopardize valuable professional support systems, creating a need for diplomatic communication that preserved access to technical expertise while pursuing entirely different personal objectives. The workplace environment was providing perfect cover for this kind of strategic relationship management, allowing her to maintain multiple beneficial connections while prioritizing those that offered the greatest career advancement potential. The superascome she was attempting to achieve involved successfully managing complex social dynamics without losing access to valuable professional resources or creating unnecessary workplace drama. The psychology of strategic explanation often reveals the speaker's sophisticated understanding of power dynamics and social management, demonstrating how individuals navigate complex professional environments where personal choices must be balanced against career considerations and relationship maintenance. Her use of the phrase, "just opportunities," was carrying multiple layers of meaning that acknowledged the career advancement potential of her relationship with the regional director, while attempting to minimize its romantic significance in ways that might preserve her access to technical support and professional friendship. The technician was beginning to understand that her recent behavior had been governed by strategic considerations that went far beyond simple romantic interest, encompassing career planning and relationship management that operated according to professional logic rather than personal compatibility. The deception he was experiencing was being compounded by the recognition that her communication style demonstrated a level of social sophistication that made his own emotional investment appear naive and professionally immature. The ambient professional environment was suddenly visible as a complex ecosystem where individuals managed multiple relationship streams simultaneously, prioritizing those that offered the greatest strategic value while maintaining others for their practical utility. The confidence she was displaying in her ability to manage these complex social dynamics was revealing the difference between personal romantic interest and strategic professional behavior. The apprendizado from this interaction was teaching him that workplace relationships often operate according to career considerations that transcend individual merit or personal compatibility. Corporate environments often require individuals to develop sophisticated communication skills for managing complex social situations, where personal choices must be explained without jeopardizing valuable professional relationships or creating unnecessary workplace complications. Her Monday morning explanation was demonstrating the kind of diplomatic language that successful professionals use to navigate situations where romantic pursuits might conflict with beneficial workplace associations. The technician found himself receiving a masterclass in how strategic thinking governs workplace relationships, with her careful word choice revealing awareness of how her recent behavior might be perceived by someone who had developed emotional investments in their interactions. The regional director was being characterized as an opportunity rather than a romantic partner, language that acknowledged career advancement potential while attempting to minimize personal romantic significance in ways that might preserve access to technical expertise and professional support. The workplace hierarchy was becoming visible through her explanation, revealing how career considerations and power dynamics influence romantic choices in ways that make individual merit feel irrelevant to actual relationship outcomes. The loyalty she was attempting to preserve through careful explanation was actually highlighting the strategic nature of her previous attention and the calculated approach she took to managing multiple beneficial professional relationships. The ambient professional environment was providing perfect cover for this kind of sophisticated social management, allowing her to maintain access to valuable resources while pursuing entirely different personal and career objectives. The moment when strategic explanation meets emotional investment often creates a psychological collision that reveals the fundamental difference between professional utility and personal romantic significance, forcing honest recognition of where individuals actually stand in complex workplace relationship hierarchies. Her characterization of the regional director as representing opportunities was revealing the career-focused logic that had governed her romantic choices, making the technician's technical expertise feel professionally valuable, but personally insufficient compared to hierarchical influence and advancement potential. The workplace environment that had seemed to nurture their developing relationship was being revealed as a complex social system where she had been successfully managing multiple beneficial connections while prioritizing those that offered the greatest strategic value. Her Monday morning damage control was demonstrating the sophisticated social intelligence required to navigate professional environments where personal choices must be balanced against career considerations and relationship maintenance. The frustration he was experiencing was not just about romantic disappointment, but about the professional humiliation of recognizing that his emotional investment had been managed rather than reciprocated. The confidence she was displaying in her ability to explain complex social situations was highlighting the difference between enjoying someone's professional company and committing to exclusive romantic involvement with them. The superasson she was attempting to achieve involved preserving valuable professional relationships while pursuing entirely different personal objectives based on career advancement and power dynamics. Professional damage control often reveals the true nature of workplace relationships by forcing individuals to articulate their actual priorities and strategic considerations in ways that can shatter carefully maintained illusions about mutual romantic interest and emotional investment. The technician's growing awareness that her explanation was designed to preserve his technical support while acknowledging her romantic pursuit of career advancement was creating a psychological reorganization that extended far beyond simple personal disappointment. Her use of language like "nothing serious" and "opportunities" was demonstrating the sophisticated communication skills that successful professionals develop for managing complex social situations where personal choices might conflict with beneficial workplace associations. The regional director's appeal was being acknowledged not just as personal attraction, but as career advancement potential that made technical expertise seem irrelevant to romantic competition within hierarchical professional environments. The workplace dynamics that had seemed to support their developing relationship were being revealed as strategic relationship management that maintained valuable professional connections while pursuing entirely different romantic objectives based on power considerations and career planning. The deception he was experiencing was being compounded by the recognition that her communication style revealed a level of social sophistication that made his own emotional approach appear professionally naive. The trahison he was recognizing was not just personal but strategic, involving the calculated management of his emotional investment to preserve access to technical expertise while pursuing entirely different romantic objectives with someone who offered greater career advancement potential. Looking back, this Monday morning explanation would serve as a defining lesson in how workplace relationships actually function beneath the surface of professional courtesy and technical collaboration, revealing the sophisticated social management required to navigate complex professional environments where career considerations often govern romantic choices and relationship priorities. Her characterization of the regional director as opportunities would become a masterclass in diplomatic language designed to preserve valuable professional relationships while acknowledging romantic pursuits that operated according to entirely different logic than personal compatibility or shared interests. The ambient professional environment was being revealed as a stage where strategic thinking and career advancement often trumped individual merit in determining romantic outcomes, making technical expertise feel professionally valuable but romantically insufficient compared to hierarchical influence and power dynamics that shaped actual relationship success within corporate ecosystems. Topic 7. He just replied, "Funny. I also thought it was just a temporary repair." The art of dignified response in moments of personal and professional betrayal often requires a delicate balance between acknowledging hurt feelings and maintaining the kind of composure that preserves self-respect while delivering subtle but unmistakable commentary on the situation. The technician's carefully chosen words carried multiple layers of meaning that demonstrated his growing understanding of how their recent interactions had actually functioned within the complex ecosystem of workplace relationships and strategic social management. His response about temporary repair was simultaneously acknowledging her explanation while drawing a parallel that highlighted the transactional nature of what he had interpreted as genuine romantic connection. The ambient professional environment provided perfect cover for this kind of diplomatic but pointed communication, allowing him to express his disappointment without creating unnecessary workplace drama or professional complications. The confianza he had previously placed in his interpretation of their relationship was now being redirected into a more sophisticated understanding of how workplace dynamics actually operate beneath the surface of friendly professional interaction. The loyalty he had been developing was being transformed into a form of self-respect that refused to accept strategic management disguised as authentic personal connection. The workplace suddenly felt like a stage where he could demonstrate his own social intelligence by refusing to be managed or manipulated through carefully crafted explanations that minimized the significance of his emotional investment while preserving access to his professional expertise. Professional environments often serve as testing grounds for character and social intelligence, creating situations where individuals must choose between accepting strategic management or asserting their own dignity through responses that acknowledge reality without surrendering self-respect. The technician's metaphorical reference to temporary repair was revealing his sophisticated understanding of how their entire relationship had functioned as a form of professional maintenance rather than authentic romantic development. His word choice demonstrated that he had learned valuable lessons about the difference between being professionally useful and being personally valued, between providing services that others appreciate and being chosen for qualities that transcend utilitarian considerations. The frustration he had been experiencing was now being channeled into a response that was both professionally appropriate and personally satisfying, allowing him to acknowledge her explanation while simultaneously commenting on the temporary and strategic nature of her previous attention. The workplace hierarchy that had seemed to support career-advancing romantic choices was now being acknowledged through language that revealed his awareness of how power dynamics actually govern relationship outcomes within professional environments. Her attempt at damage control was being met with a response that demonstrated his own capacity for strategic communication and social intelligence. The superasome he was beginning to experience came from refusing to accept explanations that minimized his emotional investment while attempting to preserve access to his professional services. The psychology of dignified response often reveals character qualities that transcend immediate emotional reactions, demonstrating an individual's capacity for strategic thinking and social awareness that can transform moments of personal disappointment into opportunities for demonstrating sophistication and self-respect. His metaphorical language about temporary repair was carrying implications that went far beyond simple wordplay, acknowledging the professional utility of their recent interactions, while commenting on the strategic and limited nature of her romantic investment in their relationship. The technician was demonstrating that he understood the difference between authentic personal connection and professional relationship management, refusing to accept explanations that preserved her access to technical support while minimizing the significance of his emotional investment. The deception he had experienced was being transformed into a form of social intelligence that recognized strategic behavior and responded with equal sophistication rather than emotional reactivity or professional awkwardness. The ambient professional environment was providing perfect cover for this kind of diplomatic but pointed communication, allowing both parties to acknowledge complex realities without creating unnecessary workplace drama or professional complications. The confidence he was displaying in his response revealed that he had learned important lessons about workplace relationships and was no longer willing to be managed through strategic explanations that prioritized career advancement over personal honesty. The apprendizado from this experience was teaching him that sometimes the most powerful response to strategic management is dignified acknowledgement that refuses to accept minimization or manipulation. Corporate culture often celebrates diplomatic communication and professional courtesy, but rarely provides guidance for responding to situations where personal emotions have been strategically managed for professional utility rather than acknowledged as genuine human experiences worthy of respect and consideration. The technician's response was demonstrating the kind of social intelligence that successful professionals develop for navigating complex workplace situations where personal and professional interests intersect in ways that can create conflicts between individual dignity and strategic relationship management. His metaphorical reference to temporary repair was revealing his sophisticated understanding of how workplace relationships often function as professional maintenance rather than authentic personal connection, requiring strategic management rather than genuine emotional investment. The regional director's appeal as opportunities was being acknowledged through language that recognized career advancement logic, while simultaneously commenting on the temporary and utilitarian nature of romantic connections, based primarily on hierarchical considerations rather than personal compatibility. Her attempt to preserve valuable professional relationships while pursuing entirely different romantic objectives was being met with a response that demonstrated equal strategic sophistication without sacrificing personal dignity or professional appropriateness. The workplace environment was providing perfect cover for this kind of complex social communication, allowing both parties to acknowledge difficult realities while maintaining the professional courtesy necessary for continued collaboration. The loyalty she was attempting to preserve through careful explanation was being met with a response that acknowledged her strategic approach while establishing boundaries around how his professional services and emotional investment would be managed in the future. The moment when strategic explanation meets equally strategic response often creates a form of social equilibrium that allows both parties to acknowledge complex realities while preserving the professional relationships necessary for continued workplace effectiveness and career advancement. The technician's carefully chosen words were demonstrating that he had developed his own capacity for diplomatic communication and strategic thinking, refusing to accept management of his emotional investment through explanations that minimized romantic significance while preserving access to professional utility. His response about temporary repair was revealing the sophisticated social intelligence required to navigate workplace relationships where career considerations often govern romantic choices and strategic behavior often masquerades as authentic personal connection. The workplace hierarchy that had influenced her romantic preferences was being acknowledged through language that recognized power dynamics, while simultaneously establishing his own dignity and self-respect as non-negotiable factors in future professional interactions. The frustration he had experienced was being transformed into a form of social sophistication that could respond to strategic management with equal intelligence and diplomatic skill. The confidence he was displaying revealed that he understood the difference between professional appreciation and personal romantic interest, between being useful and being valued, between providing services and being chosen for qualities that transcended utilitarian considerations. The superascent he was beginning to achieve came from demonstrating that he could navigate complex workplace social dynamics with the same strategic intelligence that others use to manage multiple beneficial relationships while pursuing primarily career-focused romantic objectives. Professional environments often serve as laboratories for developing sophisticated communication skills and social intelligence, creating situations where individuals learn to respond to strategic management with equal sophistication while preserving personal dignity and professional effectiveness. The technician's response was demonstrating that he had learned valuable lessons about workplace relationships, power dynamics, and the difference between authentic connection and strategic behavior disguised as personal interest. His metaphorical language about temporary repair was carrying multiple layers of meaning that acknowledged her explanation, while simultaneously commenting on the strategic nature of their entire relationship and the temporary quality of romantic connections based primarily on career advancement rather than personal compatibility. The regional director's characterization as opportunities was being met with language that recognized the career-focused logic of her romantic choices while establishing boundaries around how his own emotional investment and professional services would be managed in future interactions. The workplace environment was providing perfect cover for this kind of complex social communication, allowing both parties to demonstrate strategic intelligence while maintaining the professional courtesy necessary for continued collaboration and mutual respect. The deception he had experienced was being transformed into a form of social sophistication that could navigate complex workplace dynamics without sacrificing personal dignity or professional effectiveness. The trahison he had recognized was being acknowledged through diplomatic language that refused to accept strategic management while maintaining appropriate professional boundaries and mutual respect. Looking back, this moment of strategic response would serve as a crucial education in how workplace relationships actually function beneath the surface of professional courtesy and technical collaboration, revealing the sophisticated communication skills required to navigate complex social situations, where personal emotions intersect with career considerations and strategic relationship management. The technician's carefully chosen words about temporary repair would become a defining example of how dignified response can acknowledge difficult realities while preserving self-respect and establishing appropriate boundaries for future professional interactions. The ambient professional environment was being revealed as a stage where strategic intelligence and social sophistication often determined relationship outcomes far more than individual merit or authentic personal connection, making diplomatic communication skills essential for maintaining professional effectiveness while preserving personal dignity in complex workplace social ecosystems. Topic 8. Months later, the technician was promoted to IT coordinator at headquarters. When she appeared with her broken phone, he smiled. "Now, I only work on systems with antivirus." The sweet satisfaction of professional vindication often arrives precisely when we have learned to value our own worth independent of others' recognition, creating moments where past disappointments transform into present wisdom and future protection against similar emotional investments. The technician's promotion to IT coordinator at headquarters represented far more than career advancement. It symbolized the recognition of competence and character that had always existed, but was now being acknowledged at organizational levels that transcended local workplace dynamics and romantic politics. His new position carried responsibilities and influence that operated according to merit-based evaluation, rather than the complex social maneuvering that had characterized his previous work environment. The ambient professional environment at headquarters felt distinctly different from the local office ecosystem, where personal relationships and hierarchical attractions had seemed to govern romantic outcomes more than individual capability or authentic connection. The confianza he now felt in his professional identity was built on institutional recognition rather than interpersonal validation, creating a foundation of self-worth that was independent of others' strategic relationship management or romantic preferences. The loyalty he had learned to place in his own competence and character was providing protection against the kind of emotional manipulation that had previously made him vulnerable to strategic behavior, disguised as authentic personal interest. The workplace had become a space where his expertise was valued at levels that transcended local social dynamics and romantic complications. Professional growth often provides perspective on past experiences that were initially perceived as personal failures or romantic disappointments, revealing how individual worth and career trajectory operate according to different timelines and evaluation criteria than immediate workplace social dynamics. The technician's elevation to coordinator status was demonstrating that competence and character eventually receive recognition that transcends the temporary influence of hierarchical romantic attractions and strategic relationship management. His new responsibilities included oversight of technical operations across multiple locations, providing him with insights into how workplace relationships and career advancement actually function within larger organizational structures. The frustration he had previously experienced was now being recontextualized as valuable education in distinguishing between professional utility and personal worth, between being strategically managed and being authentically valued. The regional director's influence, while significant within local office dynamics, was operating at organizational levels that were ultimately subordinate to the technical expertise and leadership capabilities that had earned him promotion to headquarters coordination. Her previous characterization of romantic relationships as opportunities was being revealed as limited thinking that prioritized short-term career considerations over longer-term professional development and authentic personal connection. The super-assault he was experiencing came from achieving recognition that was based on merit rather than social maneuvering, creating confidence that was independent of others' romantic preferences or strategic behavior. The psychology of professional vindication often creates opportunities for demonstrating the wisdom and character development that emerge from surviving workplace betrayal and emotional manipulation, allowing individuals to respond to familiar situations with sophisticated understanding rather than reactive emotion. When she appeared at his new headquarters office with another technological crisis, the technician found himself observing the interaction through the lens of hard-earned experience rather than romantic possibility or professional obligation. Her presence carried the same urgent energy that had initially attracted his attention and emotional investment, but his perspective had been fundamentally altered by understanding how strategic behavior operates within workplace environments. The deception he had previously experienced was now serving as emotional immunity against similar manipulation, allowing him to recognize patterns of crisis-driven attention-seeking that were designed to elicit helpful responses from professionally competent individuals. The ambient professional environment at headquarters provided perfect context for demonstrating the kind of strategic intelligence that could acknowledge past experiences while establishing appropriate boundaries for future interactions. His response about antivirus systems was carrying multiple layers of meaning that acknowledged her presence while simultaneously establishing his awareness of how technological metaphors could illuminate relationship dynamics and personal protection strategies. The aprendizado from his previous experience was now being applied to create professional interactions that were helpful without being emotionally vulnerable. Corporate environments often serve as stages where individual character development becomes visible through responses to familiar situations that previously created emotional vulnerability and professional complications, demonstrating how wisdom acquired through difficult experiences can transform future interactions. The technician's new position at headquarters had provided him with organizational perspective that revealed how local office dynamics and hierarchical romantic attractions operate within larger systems that ultimately reward competence and character over social maneuvering and strategic relationship management. His metaphorical reference to antivirus systems was demonstrating the sophisticated communication skills that successful professionals develop for acknowledging complex histories while maintaining appropriate boundaries and mutual respect. Her technological crisis was being met with professional competence that was no longer accompanied by emotional investment or romantic possibility, creating interactions that were helpful without being personally vulnerable. The workplace hierarchy that had previously seemed to govern romantic outcomes was now being viewed from a position of institutional authority that operated according to different evaluation criteria and advancement opportunities. The confidence he was displaying came from understanding his own worth within organizational structures that transcended local social dynamics and romantic politics. The loyalty he had learned to place in his own competence was providing protection against strategic behavior, while allowing him to maintain professional courtesy and technical expertise. The moment when past emotional manipulation meets present wisdom often creates opportunities for demonstrating the kind of character development and social intelligence that emerge from surviving workplace betrayal and learning to value individual worth, independent of others' romantic preferences or strategic behavior. The technician's response about antivirus systems was revealing his sophisticated understanding of how technological metaphors could illuminate relationship dynamics and personal protection strategies without creating unnecessary workplace drama or professional complications. His new position had provided him with institutional recognition that validated his competence and character in ways that transcended local office social dynamics and hierarchical romantic attractions. Her familiar pattern of crisis-driven attention-seeking was being met with professional competence that was no longer accompanied by emotional vulnerability or romantic investment, demonstrating how experience teaches individuals to distinguish between authentic connection and strategic management. The ambient professional environment at headquarters was providing perfect context for interactions that acknowledged complex histories while maintaining appropriate boundaries and mutual respect. The frustration he had previously experienced was now serving as emotional intelligence that could navigate complex workplace situations without sacrificing professional effectiveness or personal dignity. The superascent he was achieving came from demonstrating that individual worth and career advancement operate according to merit-based evaluation rather than social maneuvering or romantic politics. Professional vindication often provides the perfect context for demonstrating how character development and hard-earned wisdom can transform familiar situations into opportunities for showing sophisticated social intelligence and appropriate boundary management without sacrificing professional courtesy or technical competence. The technician's carefully chosen words about antivirus systems were carrying implications that acknowledged their shared history while establishing his current approach to workplace relationships and emotional protection strategies. His promotion to headquarters coordination had provided him with organizational authority and institutional recognition that operated independently of local social dynamics and romantic politics, creating confidence that was based on merit rather than interpersonal validation. Her technological crisis was being met with the same professional competence that had initially attracted her attention, but now accompanied by wisdom that distinguished between providing helpful services and making emotional investments in strategic behavior disguised as authentic personal connection. The workplace environment was providing perfect cover for interactions that maintained professional courtesy, while demonstrating the kind of emotional intelligence that emerges from surviving workplace betrayal and learning to value individual worth independent of others' romantic preferences. The deception he had previously experienced was now serving as protection against similar manipulation, while allowing him to maintain the professional effectiveness and technical expertise that had earned him institutional recognition and career advancement. The trahison he had survived was being acknowledged through metaphorical language that established appropriate boundaries while maintaining mutual respect and professional collaboration. Looking back, this moment of professional vindication would serve as the culmination of a journey from emotional vulnerability to sophisticated wisdom, demonstrating how workplace betrayal can ultimately become the foundation for character development and social intelligence that creates protection against future manipulation while preserving professional effectiveness and personal dignity. The technician's response about antivirus systems would become a perfect example of how technological metaphors can illuminate relationship dynamics and personal protection strategies while maintaining professional courtesy and mutual respect. The ambient professional environment was being revealed as a complex ecosystem where merit-based evaluation ultimately provides more reliable recognition than social maneuvering or romantic politics, making individual competence and character the most important factors in achieving lasting career success and personal satisfaction within organizational structures that reward authentic value over strategic behavior. Your journey towards sophisticated workplace wisdom starts with recognizing that individual merit and authentic character eventually receive institutional recognition that transcends local social dynamics and romantic politics. Subscribe to continue learning how to build antivirus systems for your professional relationships while maintaining the technical excellence and genuine human decency that create lasting career success and personal satisfaction.